We all know that when you buy a piece of property, you're not just buying the property's surface features. Underneath these features are various layers of rock and soil. And although you can't see them, you know they are there. This is a good way to think about property rights. Your property rights are not visible on the actual land itself, but you know that you now have them. In fact, when you buy a piece of property, you're mostly buying the right to do things on that land. And these rights can be pretty wide-ranging. Zoning laws and growth restrictions can limit these options, but even with that, you still have basic rights of ownership. Let's take a look at some of the basic rights you have when you own a property. The most obvious right you have is the right of privacy. In other words, you can keep people from going on or using your land without your permission. Another big asset you probably have is the right to develop the property. Again, depending on local restrictions, the allowable extent of any development can vary, but you probably have the right to develop your property in various ways. Other rights could include mineral rights, forestry rights, and many others. The point is, you as a landowner have many rights, and among those rights is your ability to conserve your property forever through a conservation easement. What is a conservation easement? Let's start with the root word, easement. There are all kinds of easements. Easements for access, for utilities, and other uses. Let's start with the most common type of easement, an access easement. Suppose a neighboring family cannot access the main road from their property. Remember how we said that one of your most basic rights is the right to privacy? But your neighbor is landlocked. They cannot get to the main road. So they ask you if they can buy an access easement from you. So in essence, they want to pay you to ease your right of privacy over a certain section of your land so they can access the main road from their property. This granting of easement restricts your right to keep your neighbor off of a certain part of your property. After the easement is granted, your neighbor can use the access easement area, let's say, for a driveway. The easement agreement can further stipulate all sorts of other limitations as well. Access easements usually involve the payment of some kind, and they follow the property's title, so they will pertain to any other new owner as well. And usually these restrictions and limitations are in perpetuity. Perpetuity means forever. So now that we understand that an access easement is the partial easing of your right to privacy, what is a conservation easement? Simply put, a conservation easement is an easing of certain rights that, if expressed, would destroy the current natural condition of the land. Some inherent rights do not impact the natural condition of the property. For instance, the right of privacy. But other rights, if expressed, do impact the land's natural condition. A conservation easement limits or extinguishes the expression of these destructive rights by transferring them to a land trust, who extinguishes them in perpetuity. It is important to understand that conservation easements are flexible. You don't have to give up all the impactful property rights in order to do a conservation easement. You could limit development rights by allowing for only 1 or 2 houses. Another right you can protect is agricultural rights, meaning you can limit use of the property to agriculture only, thereby eliminating building development. You could limit forestry harvest plans while allowing for the sale of carbon credits, a great source of income for you as a landowner, while you help curb the effects of climate change. Many options are possible. If you choose to conserve your property, you may claim a tax credit. You may sell the conservation easement to a land trust, who would then get a grant to pay you for it. There are only 2 requirements that a conservation easement must meet. It must be in perpetuity, and it must be independently enforced. In other words, it must be protected forever, and it must have an independent source of funding for monitoring and enforcement. Most typically, this would be in the form of an endowment. You have the right to protect your property for yourself and future generations. Contact your local regional land trust, who can help you save your land forever. Funds for the Conservation Easements Made Simple series were made available through the California Strategic Growth Council's Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, or SALC, in collaboration with the Department of Conservation. SALC is part of Climate Investments, a statewide initiative that puts billions of cap-and-trade dollars to work reducing greenhouse gas emissions, strengthening the economy, and improving public health and the environment, particularly in disadvantaged communities.